Hello brick sculptors and welcome back to Brick Sculpt. Today we're going to talk about Lego SNOT theory. Now this is going to be an interesting one. This is going to be a little bit more mathematical, but I'll try to keep it interesting for you. And this is going to prove really handy when it comes to building with SNOT technique, because knowing the measurements and the dimensions and the math behind this makes building with SNOT technique so much easier, and you can really open up and do lots of different things with it once you know the logic behind it. So first of all, let's talk about some basic measurements. Probably the most basic form of Lego measurement is this right here, the brick. Okay, this is widely known as the most standard unit of Lego measurement, but honestly I don't think it is the best unit of Lego measurement because it's very easily broken down into smaller units. For example, this is the plate. The plate, as you probably know, is 1/3 of a brick. So if we stack 3 of these, we have a brick. Okay. Now today we're going to use a form of measurement called an LBU. I did not come up with this. This is a known thing. Not known by many, I don't believe, but it is a known thing throughout the Lego world. And LBU stands for Lego Building Unit. Now a Lego Building Unit is going to be our smaller unit of measure that we're going to use to refer to when we talk about all SNOT technique. So Lego Building Unit is the width of one plate. One plate. Now bear with me if you're a metric person. Unfortunately, we are standard American English here, and believe it or not, Lego translates better into standard American English than it does into metric. But the width of one Lego plate is actually 1/8 inch. In metric, it's 3.2 millimeters. But that is what we're going to call an LBU. This doesn't include the stud, just the width of the plate itself. So 1/8 inch, 3.2 millimeters, 1/3 of a brick, and I've written these down here so you can see them and reference them. And so that is going to be called an LBU. So when you hear me say LBU, if you forget, it's right there, okay? So why is this important? Well, when we're talking SNOT technique, LBUs are very important because we have to use them to determine if parts are going to line up. So let's go ahead and talk about some SNOT bricks here. And I'm going to group these into different schools of SNOT brick. The first ones, and probably the most common, are these guys here, where you have a standard brick with one SNOT piece off the front. You can get them in variations of 2 or 4, and I'm going to include this guy in the bunch as well. Now these SNOT bricks are unique in a few ways. These SNOT bricks, when put on a base plate, have enough height underneath them where you can put a plate on SNOT style and it still has room for the studs. So you can run these right on the base plate and still build off the side of these pieces. The reason that is a Lego brick is, as we've already discussed, 3 LBUs tall, but the width is 2.5 LBUs. So a standard plate, if we're looking at it from this dimension, is going to be 2.5 LBUs by 2.5 LBUs. And if we put that on here, you'll see we have a 1/2 LBU extra because this is 3 LBUs tall, which allows us to stick it down flat to a studded plate and still be able to build off the side. This piece does not fit that mold, but I'm going to explain a little bit why this fits with this family. But first, let's talk about this family. And this is just a 4-wide variation, same thing. This family here is very different in that if you run this flat on a plate, you can't build off the side because there's no 1/2 LBU underneath. And I should mention a stud height is a 1/2 LBU. So you can't put this flush on a plate. You would have to build this up 1 LBU to put it on a base plate. And then you also, the added advantage, you can put a floor there and run it flush. You can't do that with this piece. If you put a floor down, this will no longer stick because a floor is 1 lbu tall, and this only gives you a half lbu, so you can't do it. Okay, but you can with these. Now the way they accomplish that, because most people think that two of these together is essentially one of these, and they're very different. Because of that extra half lbu, once you do this, you can't stick anything flush on here like you can with this. You can build off the side of this. These are spaced too far apart. Now there is a remedy. If you add 2 lbus in between them, you can build off every other stud. So you could put a plate on this now, just like that. Same thing if we try to combine these two. This is spaced too far apart. We can't stick it to it. However, we could do this. And the reason being is the extra half lbu is on the bottom. So these fit perfectly. Now let's bring this guy back in the picture. Now why did I group this in the first family? Because this second family is flush in lbus top and bottom. This first family is not. Now this one's the opposite. It's not flush on top, so it's negative lbus on top. So if I were to try to put this on here, it would work just fine on top. Just like that. Now you do have a negative half lbu up top, which can create a problem. If I try to flip this around, you can see these two sit way too close together and they won't work because you have a negative half lbu. But if we get a piece that has a positive half lbu, put them together, now we essentially just created this piece with a little piece of plate in the back. This is the only way I've seen this piece sold, is in this plate form. But this is essentially the same thing. We could connect these, no problem, because the negative half lbu and the positive half lbu balanced out. So you could also do something like this, and you could have a full wall with all those different pieces combined, negative or positive half lbu, negative half lbu there. So very interesting. This is also just like this, but has the ability to build around corners. So essentially the same piece, just with a little added benefit on the sides there, if you need to build around a corner. Now, the next family deals more with half lbus going sideways. But first, let's talk about how these would build sideways. So let's set up a little demonstration here. We're going to put down 1 lbu plate. We're just going to line up some tile here in single increments so that you can see how far we can go. And let's start with putting this guy right here. And we're going to build sideways, right? So if I wanted to stick a brick, 3 lbus on here, where would this come out? Well, it's bigger than 1, not quite 2. Well, can we make it only the width of 1 plate? No, we cannot. The reason being is, as mentioned before, the dimensions of the brick, 3 lbus tall and 2.5 wide. So we can't make this 2.5 wide. We can go 1 wide. We can go 2 wide. And this actually, with the studs, is 2.5 wide, but it has a gap. And if we go to add our 3rd lbu, it's now 2 wide. So let's go back to the dimensions of the width of these. 2.5 lbus, 2.5 lbus is 2.5 1/8 inches. So half of an eighth of an inch is a 1/16 of an inch. 1/8 is equivalent to 2/16. So 2/16 plus 2/16 plus 1/16 is 5/16. Now 5/16 doubled gets us back to something that you can divide into 1/8 inches. So 5/16 and 5/16 is 10/16 or 5/8. 5/8, if 1/8 is a plate, 5/8 is 5 plates. So here's 3 lbus, 1 brick, 4 lbus, 5 lbus, and that will line up perfectly flush going across 2 bricks width, or 5 lbus. When building sideways with these pieces, you can only build in increments of even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc., because of the measurement of the lbu. So how do we get around that if we only wanted to build over 1, or maybe 3, or 5? Well, that's where the next family comes in. You've probably seen these pieces before, or they make one that comes up from the bottom. They make this in a 4 stud also. I just don't have one here. They even make them in little ones. And I'm going to lump this piece into this family too, which you're probably familiar with. That's the headlight piece. Now, why are these all in the same family? Well, this has 1 lbu built into it, and I can build into it 4 more lbus, and I've essentially made this piece, right? Except it's a half an lbu wider. So if I go back to my little setup here, now I can build on the odd numbers. Half lbu, 1.5 lbus, 2.5 lbus, and that's 1 brick's width sideways. So when using these guys where they're positive 1/2 lbu, I can measure this on the odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. So really handy to know, depending on how far sideways you need to build, if you're going to use this guy or this guy. Now the headlight piece, you can do the same thing with. I don't think a lot of people do this technique because headlight pieces are very difficult to stack and make them useful. Not impossible. I'll show you a technique in a little bit. So if we do this, a headlight piece is negative half IBU. So if I want to go just 1 brick width over, I add 3 IBUs. So 1, 2, 3. And that works as well. Now the reason headlight bricks are not always handy is I can't build a whole wall of these. Headlight bricks are negative, but they have this little foot. So I can't stick anything to this. Also, stacking 2 headlights is a lot like stacking 2 of these, where the spacing, even if the studs did stick out, doesn't fit. So in order to use headlight bricks like this, you would need to put the 2 IBUs in the middle and then stack every other like that. But you would also need to pop the recessed sections out like this. And then you could build off the front of it like this. Now, I think that's a lot of extra work to essentially make this piece. And you can get these in 2 tall as well, both hanging down and coming up. But who knows, maybe you have a technique where headlight bricks will work better. This piece predates all of these SNOT pieces. This was out long before all of these, and it's because it was used for car headlights. But it obviously has other uses and can be really handy if you're trying to recess a plate back into a wall and make like a guardrail or a runner. You can do a whole row of these and it looks really good because you can push it back into the wall and have that negative half stud. But you can't run anything flush to a wall like you could with something like this. So I hope you found this useful and not just a bunch of boring math and talk about IBUs and brick widths. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or things I missed or forgot about, please put them down in the comments. I'm always learning this stuff, and SNOT technique is something you definitely can't know enough of because it's becoming more and more popular in building. And so the more you know, the better you are and the better stuff you can build with it. I'll try to do a video in the future showing some different SNOT techniques in actual practical builds that aren't just boring white bricks. But for now, that's it, and we will see you next time.